Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. 2 Israeli embassy staffers are shot dead in Washington, D.C. as a suspect reportedly accuses Israel of atrocities. The British Prime Minister signs an agreement with Mauritius to hand over the Chagos Islands. The UK government proposes early releases for offenders to reduce a prison population. And introducing pro-doping sport, the first athletes to sign up to the controversial Enhanced Games. Now to our top story. And 2 Israeli embassy staff have been shot dead in Washington, D.C. Yaron Linchinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram were killed as they left an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. 30-year-old suspect Elias Rodriguez from Chicago, Illinois, is in police custody. He shouted "Free Palestine" as he was arrested. In the past hour, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi told reporters the suspect would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
I can tell you security has been increased here as of last night. Our U.S. Marshals are working hand in hand to make sure the embassy is safe. Everything we know now, he acted alone. From everything we know now, this is an ongoing investigation. But you know, whether you're Jewish or not, be vigilant.
We can now go live to Tel Aviv to speak to former Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy. Eylon, a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. What's your reaction to the events outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C.?
This is what globalizing the Intifada looks like. It's a shocking political murder, but no one should be shocked. The writing was on the wall. We've seen months of increasing radicalization among American youth, people chanting "globalize the Intifada" by any means necessary. And this is the result. There has been a vicious information war against Israel to paint it as uniquely evil. And so no one should be surprised that people are taking action into their own hands. Since the beginning of the October 7th war, Israel has been under attack, not on 7 fronts, on 8. We've seen a massive upswing in targeted political violence against Jews and Israelis around the world. You can remember Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. His house was set on fire. A report of an attempted Iranian terror attack against the British embassy in London. So this didn't come out of nowhere. People said globalize the Intifada. The second Intifada was a wave of suicide bombings and terrorism against Israelis. And globalizing that means targeted political violence against Jews and Israelis. That's what we got yesterday. Now there's blood on the streets of the West.
Eylon, President Trump has condemned the killings on social media and blamed them on anti-Semitism. As you were just mentioning there, are Jewish people around the world in imminent danger?
Yes, Jews around the world are feeling increasing anxiety because of the increasing extremism and radicalization within Western societies. The increasing protest, the vitriol against Israel, the attempt to paint it as genocidal rather than fighting against a genocidal regime called Hamas, all of this has increased hate against Israel. It's increased hate against Jews who are seen as affiliated with Israel, and it has increased attacks, verbal attacks, physical attacks. Synagogues in the United States increasingly look like synagogues in Europe with high security, not like other places of worship where people can walk freely. People are on edge because the writing was on the wall, and the vicious incitement against Israel and Jews has to stop because it's already led to political murders in the West. And I'm afraid if this carries on, if the chance of globalize the Intifada by any means necessary continue, this is only the beginning and it needs to be the end.
Eylon, I do understand that this is a sensitive time. Israel's foreign minister has put some of the blame on leaders and officials abroad, especially in Europe, saying who surrendered to the Palestinian terrorist propaganda. You've touched on it there. You've said that this has been something that's been against the Israelis. It's been a wider problem. What do you make of his comments, which come during a week of tense relations between certain countries and Israel?
Yeah, this week we saw really an astonishing diplomatic betrayal by Israel's allies that have decided to use diplomatic pressure in order to force Israel to accept Hamas remaining in power in Gaza. Now, at the beginning of the war, they understood Hamas has to leave power or else a sustainable ceasefire is impossible, right? It's a jihadi regime committed to Israel's destruction. And if Hamas stays in power, the next war is only a matter of time. But those politicians have been pressured by the same violent public protests against Israel that we have seen, the same information warfare that we have seen against Israel that's poisoned public opinion. They're being affected by exactly the same trends. And that is why we've been saying it's so important to stand up to the increasingly deranged allegations being made against Israel, painting it as evil, because when you don't stamp out the lies about Israel, people decide to act on them. And it's leading to these sorts of political murders. That's why it's so important that people stand up against that hatred of Israel and attempts to glorify terrorism. These aren't just pro-Palestinian protests. It's glorifying Islamist terrorism on the streets of the West. And here is where it leads.
So no one is condoning this level of violence we've seen in Washington, but can you understand why people are angry about what's going on in Gaza in terms of the lack of aid? Israel's tough military offensive, which is coming. We actually spoke to a journalist, Mohammed Thabet, on the Strip last night. Here's what he had to say about the reality of the situation for people in Gaza. Take a listen.
Well, the situation in Gaza is extremely difficult. As we know, for the past 80 days, no aid have entered for the UN humanitarian organization, nor to the private sector. As recent reports by the UNICEF stated that we have 71,000 cases of malnutrition amongst children, 14,000 of whom might face death in the near future without intervention, as well as 300 cases of miscarriage by pregnant women.
Elon, I don't know if you can react to that, because that was pretty hard-hitting about the lack of aid and life in Gaza at the moment due to this blockade. And Israel can't really deny it when we're hearing from someone on the Strip.
Yeah, people are right to be upset in the Gaza Strip because war is hell. And they should divert that anger at the side that started this war and refuses to end this war by surrendering and freeing the hostages. Many Gazans are already bravely speaking up against Hamas. They have been risking their lives to protest against Hamas, saying, you brought this disaster on us with the invasion of Israel on October 7th. Just lay down your arms, give back the hostages, and go into exile. That's the deal that's been on the table since October 7th, and the war can end tomorrow. Now, Israel is now trying to get aid directly to people who need it, while making sure Hamas can't steal it. It announced the current blockade after letting in nearly 500,000 tons of aid into enemy territory in the space of 6 weeks. The problem is Hamas hijacked that aid. It stole it. That's why people in Gaza are buying the food for money at exorbitant prices in the markets, because it's been looted and sold to them for a profit. So Israel is now letting aid into Gaza, but working with an American-led initiative to get aid directly to the people who need it, and bypassing Hamas, that has been using that aid in order to finance its war machine and prolong this war that it started and has been causing so much misery for Palestinians and Israelis alike.
Elon Levy, former Israeli government spokesman, I appreciate you joining me on this difficult day. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you. We can now go live to Washington to speak to our correspondent, Tony Waterman. Tony, thank you for joining me. Police have a suspect right now in custody. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. So this shooting took place just a little bit after 9 p.m. on Wednesday evening, so just last night, as people were leaving an event that was for young diplomats here at the Capitol Jewish Museum behind me. And police say that the suspect was pacing outside of the museum before the shooting took place. And then as people started to leave the event, he approached 4 individuals, shooting 2 of them at very close range. And now we know the victims of this shooting, of course, 30-year-old Yaron Lichinsky and his 26-year-old girlfriend, Sarah Milgram, both of them employees at the Israeli embassy. And officials say that after the shooting took place, that the suspect entered the museum, and eyewitnesses say that he tried to play himself off as an eyewitness himself before he was detained by security officials. And as he was being taken into custody, police say that he said, "Free, free Palestine." There is some video floating around on social media which would seem to confirm this. And officials are saying at this point that they believe that this was a targeted attack and that this suspect acted alone. That suspect, 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez from Chicago, FBI agents searching what they believe to be his apartment in Chicago to try to get any sort of evidence about what motivated him in this attack. This investigation, of course, is still in the very, very early stages. Investigators are on scene here behind me, and they're trying to understand if he came here to this specific event intentionally, that he targeted those individuals intentionally. It's very much in its early phase right now, but we are expecting some press conferences to be taking place in just about an hour's time, including from lawmakers who are going to come down here to pay their respects.
And Tony, we've also been hearing that Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken to the parents of the victim. What more do we know about that conversation?
That's right. The Prime Minister says that he spoke to both sets of parents, and in a social media post, he said that he expressed just his profound grief with this family for all of the people of Israel. There's a lot of outrage over this shooting that took place, not just here in D.C., where we see people from the neighborhood coming. Obviously, there's a very large media presence here, but there's a lot of outrage around the world at what took place here. The victims themselves, 30-year-old Yaron Lichinsky, he worked as an analyst, a researcher in the policy department at the embassy. His girlfriend, Sarah, organized diplomatic missions and visits to Israel. And I just want to read you something off of her LinkedIn page. She said, "My passion lies at the intersection of peace building, religious engagement, and environmental work." And her friends have been saying that she was very, very dedicated to her profession and that she was just a kind individual. This was really meant to be a very exciting and joyous time for these two people. They had met just a year and a half ago when Sarah started working at the embassy. And according to the ambassador, her boyfriend had bought an engagement ring just earlier this week, and he planned to propose to her as they both went back to Israel to spend time with their families. She was going to be meeting his family for the very first time. So this was meant to be a very happy time in their lives, and it's ended in absolute tragedy.
Yes, indeed. Tony Waterman, we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much for your update. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a wide-ranging tax and spending bill backed by President Donald Trump. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the bill would add about $2.3 trillion to the U.S. national debt over the next 10 years. The bill will now head to the Republican-led Senate for approval. A small plane has crashed into a residential area of San Diego. Around 15 homes and several cars in the Murphy Canyon neighborhood were set ablaze. As a result, the city's fire services have been asking people to evacuate. Flash flooding on Australia's southeast coast has killed 3 people and isolated tens of thousands of residents. More than 4 months' worth of rain has fallen in just the past 2 days. People across the state have been warned that the situation may get even worse between now and Friday. And a new law will block people from claiming Italian citizenship through their great-grandparents. Applications for an Italian passport must now have one parent or grandparent who was a citizen by birth. Minister of Foreign Affairs Antonio Ciangini said the system was outdated and the change could crack down on abusers attempting to overcome travel restrictions. Now, sex offenders in England and Wales could face chemical castration, and thousands of other offenders will be released after serving a third of their sentence. It's under new proposed laws by the UK government ministers in a bid to curb overcrowding in prison. The aim is to reduce the country's prison population by 9,800 people by 2028. Here's how the UK Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood broke the news.
I also asked the review to consider how we manage sex offenders. The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible. Of course, it is vital that this approach is taken alongside psychological interventions that target other causes of offending, like asserting power and control.
Let's get the latest from our correspondent who's in London, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Can you explain how this will actually work in practice and how it will reduce the number of prisoners?
Well, broadly, Leigh-Ann, the government has taken the advice of a long-running review into sentencing in the judicial system, which has been led by David Gauke, who is a former Conservative Justice Minister himself. And he is recommending ways of bringing down the prison population by sentencing some offenders to shorter sentences, sentencing some offenders to no sentences at all, and using other measures in the community like tagging and other rehabilitation schemes, but also linking good behaviour in prison to earlier release. And that's why some of those offenders that you mentioned would see significantly shorter sentences than in previous years if they were behaving well while they were incarcerated. The government is stressing that for those who don't exhibit that good behaviour in prison, or who indeed exhibit bad behaviour in prison, sentences wouldn't be reduced and in some cases could actually be increased. The idea is to stop the complete overcrowding of the UK prison system, which has been really creaking in recent years. And the government today was saying that if you don't take some of the measures that are being proposed, you would see the complete overspilling of the prison system in this country. And they say that would lead to a complete breakdown, potentially, of law and order.
Yes, indeed, Ollie, but this was something that was a problem even under the Conservative government. But if we move on, this policy includes sex offenders and domestic abusers being released early. How will the government guarantee safety in the community if this does happen?
That's exactly the criticism that is being levelled at the government by the opposition Conservatives, for example, who worry about the difficulties that this could cause in the community. The government says that actually you should be able to avoid some of those issues with things like tagging to make sure that they know where prisoners are, with things like better rehabilitation schemes, all of that will mean much more funding needed for probation services to make sure that they can extend those services to offenders who are back in the community and make sure that it isn't something that leads to rising crime rather than falling crime overall. As I say, the opposition parties very sceptical, some of them, about whether that is actually what's going to happen. Victims groups as well have been expressing real concern about, particularly, for example, sex offenders being back in the community earlier than would have been the case previously. So this is very controversial. The government knows that it is politically potentially very tricky, but they also really worry about the politics, obviously, of the prison system becoming completely overcrowded and overrun at a point in the near future. So this is the calculation that they are making, but there is going to be huge scrutiny about whether we do see an uptick in offending from people released from prison early when these plans are put into place.
And Ollie, just while we actually have you, the UK has agreed to sign over control of the Chagos Islands. Can you give me the latest on that?
The latest is that there was a brief pause in this process today when there was a court challenge, but that court challenge in a second court hearing eventually was put to bed. And so the government went ahead and signed this deal with Mauritius, which does sign over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. But what it means is there is a long lease on the Diego Garcia military base, which is jointly run by the UK and the United States, which both countries see as hugely important for their own security and their abilities to run their security in the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East regions. Now, criticism from opposition parties here in the UK has described this as a sellout, as a surrender, as paying to give away territory to Mauritius, because there is a large financial element to this deal. The government insists that given legal challenges over the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, that put in danger, in jeopardy, that military base on Diego Garcia. So their formulation here that they are trying to sell now to the British public is that they have safeguarded national security by safeguarding this military base, and they've had to give over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius as part of that arrangement.
Ollie Barrett in London, always great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me. Now, North Korea's newest warship suffered severe damage during what was meant to be a launch ceremony, watched on by leader Kim Jong-un. Kim reacted with fury over the accident and said it brought, he claimed, the dignity and self-respect of the state to a collapse. Patrick Falk reports.
North Korean state media reporting on the botched launch described by naval analysts as catastrophic and a major embarrassment for the country.
After watching the whole course of the accident, the respected comrade Kim Jong-un made a stern assessment, saying that it was a serious accident and criminal act caused by absolute carelessness, irresponsibility, and unscientific empiricism, which is out of the bounds of possibility and could not be tolerated.
No images of the unnamed warship were released, and it's unclear whether the incident, which occurred on Wednesday, caused any injuries. But satellite images show the 5,000-ton destroyer docked at North Korea's Chongjin shipyard days beforehand. In a rare admission of failure, Pyongyang said a malfunction made the ship's stern slide prematurely into the water, crushing parts of the hull and leaving the bow stranded on the shipway. It marks a setback for the country's most ambitious naval modernization effort. In April, Kim, accompanied by his daughter, attended another ceremony to unveil the Choi-hyun, North Korea's first newly constructed destroyer in decades. At the time, it was presented with fanfare, with state media saying it would help strengthen preparedness against what Pyongyang called rising threats from the US and South Korea. Seoul says it had been tracking movements of the vessel that failed to launch.
Considering the size and scale, it is expected to be equipped with similar equipment to that of a Cho-hyun-class warship, and it is currently lying sideways in the water.
The blunder could now cast doubt on North Korea's ability to scale its navy. Kim has called for the ship to be repaired by the end of next month before a key meeting of the ruling Workers' Party. Experts say a rushed launch likely led to the accident and warn hasty repairs could cause more problems down the line. Patrick Falk, Arabiya.
Now, a new sport competition allowing the use of doping substances will be launched in Las Vegas next year. The enhanced games will include events like swimming, athletics and weightlifting. However, critics like the World Anti-Doping Agency have opposed the project, warning athletes they risk bans and their health. Enhanced Game co-founder Christian Angermeyer says his competition can coexist with the Olympics. Take a listen.
So I would say using performance-enhancing substances should be fully legitimized if it's in a transparent way. So I actually think, because people always want to sort of pit us against the Olympics, I think we're going to be, over time, two very different events which can totally, very lovingly coexist with each other.
And I'm pleased to say I'm now joined in the studio by former Olympic speed skater Sarah Lindsay. Sarah, great to join you. Have you and us in the studio. Great for you to join us. Let me get that out first of all. So, as a former athlete yourself, what do you make of these enhanced games, and would you ever consider taking part at all?
No, I mean, I'm very long retired now, right? But I'm just waiting for somebody to jump out and tell us this is a big joke, or at least a PR stunt. I was really lucky that I managed to compete in a very clean sport with no pressure to use performance-enhancing drugs my entire career. And I got to enjoy sport for what it really is. And this feels like an attack on what sport and competition is really all about.
And that's interesting that you say it's an attack because, you know, athletes could face bans if they do this, and also their health is massively at risk if you think about it. So do you think they are prepared to do it for a massive fee and something that, or they prepared to do it to break world records? You don't have any idea what could possibly come of this.
Of course, but I mean, I heard that they're offering, I think it was £1 million to break records, which is so irresponsible. You've got young athletes, and yes, they may be adults and can make their own decisions, but they're being influenced, one, by huge amounts of money. You know, most amateur sports, even the top athletes in those sports, will never see that kind of money. So, of course, that's going to entice people to compete in this style. So, yeah, I just think it's so irresponsible, and the long-term effects of performance-enhancing drugs as well, that you're being told by doctors that you're going to trust, and your superiors, as far as your coaches and performance directors go, if they're encouraging you to do this, then you're going to believe them.
And what's interesting is the organisers are arguing that they are trying to explore the boundaries of human potential while provoking this broader cultural conversation, because we know, Sarah, that doping happens in top-level sport and also even in amateur sport. Is there a conversation that needs to be had about doping and the dangers of performance-enhancing drugs? And is this bringing that to the fore?
Well, I think we have those conversations all the time, and I think put the money into, you know, protecting sport and stopping people doping rather than encouraging it. It just seems so backwards to me.
But these guys are basically saying that this is going to bring sport into the future because it's going to be done. You can choose. You can do the sport if you want to do it as just naturally, or if you want to use the performance-enhancing drug. But you'll be under medical supervision. And they're saying this is really the future. It's technology now when we look at sport. Do you still think that's just something that just doesn't fly, basically?
No, I'm hoping that this just gets laughed out of sport. It's not sport. This is human experiments. It's two very, very different things. And it feels to me, maybe I need to know more about it, but I think it just feels to me like a rich boys, you know, club of fun, just trying to do something for the sake of publicity, maybe.
So you don't think it's something that could actually compete with the Olympic Games at any level at all?
This is literally the opposite of what the Olympic Games is about. You know, it's supposed to be about fair competition. Everybody on the line is equal. And when you put performance-enhancing drugs into the mix, legally especially, then it's just going to become a competition of whose body can handle the most. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, there's a famous Australian swimmer, James Magnussen, a former two-time 100-metre freestyle world champion. He said he's going to compete in this. He's keen to do it. I mean, everyone to their own. Do you think we'll see more swimmers or weightlifters or athletes possibly get involved in something like this to see how far they can push their bodies?
I think it will be less about how far they can push their bodies and more about the reward. That they're offering so much money, like we just talked about earlier, £1 million for people to break these records. So, of course, more people are going to do it, and for all the wrong reasons, I'm afraid.
And you've had a few Olympic golds in your life, Sarah, am I right? Yeah?
No, I'm a three-time Olympian.
And
I have world and European medals, but not Olympics.
OK, but Olympian?
Yes.
It's really difficult to reach that level.
Of course.
And, just give us a little bit of a snapshot on what you have to do, naturally to get to that level.
I mean, I trained for nearly 20 years. I competed on the World Cup stage for a long time, and you're training, on a 4-year cycle for the Olympics, but you're training 6 to 9 hours a day, every day. You get 3 weeks off a year at the end of season, and you might get a half day off midweek, maybe Sunday if you're too tired to train. So, you're putting everything into this, everything that you believe in. You'll sacrifice anything to be able to achieve your dreams ultimately, and this kind of crushes them.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But thank you so much for joining us. And we'll have to wait to see, because next year this has been touted as happening. We'll have to see if it actually happens or it's allowed to happen. But great to have your thoughts. Thank you so much. Sarah Lindsay there, former Olympic speed skater. Thank you once again. Now let's take a look at the top business news. Bitcoin rose to a new all-time high, breaking its January record. Today, the cryptocurrency climbed as much as 2.2% in early Asian trading and hit over $110,000 after a downward trend for several weeks in the midst of tariff-related uncertainty. Bitcoin has steadily climbed up 15% in May. Nike is planning to raise prices of some products from next week and will sell items on Amazon after 6 years. It's down to the company sourcing a significant proportion of its footwear from both China and Vietnam. With the critical back-to-school shopping season approaching, Nike says it will not raise prices for children's products. Turning to the sports news now, and Tottenham Hotspur have won their first trophy since 2008 and secured a place in the Champions League. It's after Brennan Johnson's goal gave the North London side the lead, beating Man United 1-0 in the Europa League final in Bilbao. Manager Ange Postecoglou has said he's never been more proud to be the manager of a football club. And in tennis news, star Carlos Alcaraz is heading to Paris to defend his French Open title. The Spaniard's fourth straight win over Yannick Sinner joins Rafa Nadal, Novak Djokovic, Gustavo Kuerten and Marcelo Rios as the only men to have captured all three clay court ATP Masters 1000. Now, the retail giant Marks & Spencer's is back online again today after leaving users unable to shop for several hours. The company is still reeling after a cyber attack which took down the website and left customers unable to make online orders. It's believed the company has lost around £300 million in lost profits, as well as significant damage to their reputation. Joining me now in the studio to discuss this further is consumer expert and also author Kate Hardcastle. Thank you so much for joining me, Kate. So we mentioned the massive loss in profits there, but how has this affected consumer confidence in the brand Marks & Spencer's?
Yes, thanks for having me. Understandably, when consumers are involved, it's their personal data, their card details, which have been reassured were not in any case leaked here, but of course that's front of mind. Consumers want to be able to trust brands. That's a huge part of the way we shop, and this evolvement of what we've seen in consumer shopping, multi-channel, speed is everything. So when it's a beloved brand, which Marks & Spencer is all around the world, but particularly in its home UK, this is so integral. And we shop emotionally. You know, logic and tech sit together, but our choices, our brand preferences often come from that emotional point. I think it's really important to explain that the brand itself, although it's over 150 years old, had been through a journey recently. It had rebuilt back. So it's seen its best financial health in 3 decades. And this blight of millions of pounds, an estimated 83 million pounds, has come in just a matter of weeks. And that just goes to show the fragility, really, of brands and how important it is to understand that this is certainly going to be a way of life for many tech brands going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And to think about all the data we give to these shops when we do shop in them, it's something that a lot of us have to take responsibility for in many ways.
Our data is ours to own, to look after, and to become as savvy as we can. And we are dealing with technologies that are almost invented on an hourly cycle, and it will get speedier too. So anything you can do to be aware, to make sure you feel comfortable and confident, is going to be knowledgeable and valued to you and your family, your household. That said, I completely understand why any consumer would want to feel safe in the brands that they trust. And that's why we must see retailers or all consumer organisations stepping up to make sure that not only are they doing everything they can to protect consumers and customers, but in these times that the process, how they repair and how they reassure the customer is front of mind and paramount.
So what I found interesting actually is what M&S replied with. They say they will accelerate its digital transformation and as a result of the cyber attack. But surely, you know, more help might need to be there to repair this damage, but they're pretty confident in some ways coming out of this.
As I say, they're in a sweet spot of being beloved. We have brands here in this region that have the same kind of rapport with customers. It takes a long time to build. It's very quick to lose. So Marks & Spencer have to be confident here. They must explain that they are going to invest, you're quite right. But at the same time, that's purely because of how we as consumers want to shop. We want something that's a blended and seamless channel to market. We want to browse on social media. We want to perhaps peruse online, and then we might want to buy in store. We want it all to converge and feel galvanised together. That means retailers are going to have to step up in digital investment anyway. They're going to have to make it easier for themselves and the people that matter the most to stakeholders, which is the spenders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do we know how this cyber attack occurred at all? Because sometimes it's very difficult to get to the root of these things for big companies. And if Marks & Spencer's would have had to pay a ransom, is there any information of that?
There's very little information confirmed. There's a lot being talked about. So I'd like to talk to what's confirmed. Marks & Spencer have said absolutely clearly and categorically they did not leave a back door open. And what they mean by that is they don't feel it's a system failure. They feel it's a sign of times. They feel that it's an issue that a lot of brands like them will be facing. They were certainly held to ransom. We know that's been confirmed. And we understand that the group behind this are actually quite as motivated, it seems, by the financial as they are the infamy, if you like. They want to be known. They want to be the frontline headlines talking on news channels like this. So I'm not going to give them any more airtime, but I do think as consumers, you're quite right to point out, we have to be very aware in terms of the way that the line of travel is here, which is sometimes legacy technology trying to keep up with the modern customer.
No, and it's a real fragile time for the industry. And if we think about it, the retail industry, and maybe more in the UK, because we're talking about Marks & Spencer's, but how are big brands coping now? Are we finding that the high street is sort of petering out and people are using the internet more and it's becoming more and more difficult?
You're in a high growth area for it comes to social media shopping and online shopping. I've been hosting at Seamless all week, a big event in the region celebrating the best of retail technology and fintech together. So I think it's a global piece that we're seeing consumers wanting to shop how they want, where they want. They want more experience in retail real-life retail. So I'm not saying this is an end of mall or high street stores. It's an evolution. And I think we're in this platinum age of era. But unfortunately, through all golden times, through all times where we head to something brilliant, there can be pain points. And we're going to have to keep going through this pain point as technology tries to catch up in a time where we've seen probably more change in a matter of months than in a matter of decades in retail. It has evolved that quickly. So I'm thrilled to be part of the conversation. Really love helping brands as they move into this new era. But we always have to remember one core thing. The customer should be at the heart of everything we do, no matter how big or small your brand.
I'm definitely an emotional shopper. I was just going to tell you that because you mentioned it earlier and I was thinking, I'm definitely one of those people because I feel like when I shop online, I get exactly what I need. Right. But when I go into the shop, I just spend loads more money. I wonder if that's just something that all of us maybe do.
For sure. And 78% of purchase decisions are made on the spot still. Yeah. That's how much we can flex. So emotion does come into it.
No, absolutely. Great talking to you. It was lovely to have you on set. Thank you so much. Thank you. Kate Hardcastle, consumer expert and author there. Once again, thank you for joining us. A reminder of our top stories. 2 Israeli embassy staffers are shot dead in Washington, D.C. as a suspect reportedly accuses Israel of atrocities. The British Prime Minister signs an agreement with Mauritius to hand over the Chagos Islands. The UK government proposes early releases for offenders to reduce a prison population. And introducing pro-doping sport, the first athletes sign up to the controversial Enhanced Games. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Plus, we'll be back in just a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.